All right, everyone. Today at Bill's History World, we are at Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine with none other than Goober the Traveling Bear and his sidekick, Mr. Kevin. So we are about to venture into the park. We will do videos and pictures, and Goober the Traveling Bear is very excited to visit. Kevin, do you have anything you'd like to say?
You know, I've lived in Maryland for 60 years and I've never been here.
You've never been to Fort McHenry?
Fort McHenry.
All right, well, let's go and adventure. Goober, are you ready to go? And Goober's ready too. Well, I'm here with Mr. Tom, the park ranger. Take it away, Mr. Tom.
Hi, I'm Ranger Tom. Welcome to Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine. We're open from 9 a.m. till 5:45 p.m. For the historic area and the buildings, and the main gate to the grounds closes at 6. We'd love to see you.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to welcome my viewers, and I hope everyone comes and visits Fort McHenry soon. All right, well, we are inside the museum, and I'm just going to walk around a little bit. A lot of information here for you to see. Do not climb on the cannon.
I don't want to dim somebody's...
Kevin, anything about this cannon you'd like to say?
Yes, this cannon was manufactured in France and was actually in the fort in 1814.
Wow. All right.
So it probably fired.
And of course, do not sit on the exhibits. So, and Goober is in the Scoots travel bag.
Good for how long?
Oh.
Oh, look at this. What is this?
Here we have the interior of the ship. And
A small ship. A sloop.
we have our trusty flintlocks. We'll pause here. Very cool. The interaction stuff they have here is phenomenal. All right, Star-Spangled Banner, and we are still in the museum. We're getting ready to go out to the fort.
Around dawn, the British withdrew. American soldiers at Fort McHenry.
They have a lot of nice artifacts in here. I'm just, of course, giving you the snippet.
The larger flag.
I see. So that's why they were concerned when they saw the flag come down.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just wondering why the British left.
Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Powerful words from our national anthem. They speak to our American identity and are woven into our national flag. Timeless words written by one man, Francis Scott Key, about one flag at one moment. September 14th, 1814, here at Fort McHenry. In 1812, the storm clouds of war had gathered over a young United States as the nation pitted itself once more against the might of the British Empire. For For 2 years, the conflict wore on, from the British colonies of Canada to America's southern coast and out across the high seas. To draw off U.S. forces from Canada and damage America's economy and morale, the British Navy attacked and blockaded the nation's east coast heartland. Up and down the Chesapeake Bay they raided, destroying towns and farms and spreading fear. Then, in August 1814, disaster. The invading British seized Washington, D.C. and burned the nation's capital. A citizen soldier of Baltimore spoke for many.
Every American heart is bursting with shame and indignation at the catastrophe.
And Baltimore hearts were also full of anxiety, for they feared they would be next.
Citizens of Baltimore, take heed! The British fleet approaches! Admiral Coburn has declared that he will burn this nest of pirates. If you can, flee the city, take your valuables.
As Baltimore braced itself, a young Maryland lawyer, Francis Scott Key, embarked on a diplomatic mission to free a prisoner of war, sailing right into the heart of the approaching British fleet. But with their attack on Baltimore imminent, the British detained Key amidst their massing warships. On the outskirts of Baltimore, citizens, men and women, militia and regular troops, desperately prepared defenses. They dug almost a mile of earthen trenching and waited with bated breath. On September 12th, British soldiers landed at North Point, where a bloody battle with Maryland militia failed to halt their march towards Baltimore. However, the British could not tackle the city's earthwork defenses and troop reinforcements without their Navy's help. The next day, the British bomb ships would open up their main assault with a ferocious bombardment. Their target, Fort McHenry. They had to knock out the fort to bring their ships in range of the city. The fate of Baltimore now lay in the hands of the fort's defenders. Soldiers frantically prepared for battle, knowing they were the last defense to thwart the British. With the enemy in their sights, the men awaited the inevitable, a bombardment from the world's most formidable navy. Then the attack began as the British fleet pounded the fort with rockets and mortar shells. Shrapnel in all directions. The fort's defenders were, in the words of one citizen soldier, like pigeons tied by the legs to be shot at. The American artillery answered the British with desperate return fire. Would it be enough? Baltimore's citizens watched in panic through the night. One recalled,
"The attack on Fort McHenry was distinctly seen from Fenwood Hill and from the tops of houses which were covered with men, women, and children."
September 14th, the British guns finally fell silent. A huge flag was raised above the fort, but whose? Through the long night, Francis Scott Key had been forced to watch the bombardment from among the enemy fleet.
Not at all.
Nothing.
Now, he strained to see the flag in the dawn's early light.
It's ours, Mr. Skinner.
Say, we won.
It's ours.
Inspired by their courage, Key wrote down a few lines. "'Tis the Star-Spangled Banner, oh long may it wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." As the British withdrew, Key returned to Baltimore, where his words soon found music and a publisher, and the Star-Spangled Banner was born. It captured a defiant, patriotic spirit and spread rapidly across the nation, pouring new life into the national flag as a symbol of American identity. The popularity of the song and the flag grew during the years that followed. The Star-Spangled Banner eventually became the official anthem of the United States in 1931. Inspired by the brave defense of Fort McHenry, Francis Scott Key's words and the flag they so memorably portray are now woven into our sense of national identity. These words still resonate as loudly today as the glaring rockets and bursting bombs of 1814.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly there at twilight's last evening, whose must rise and bright stars through the perilous fight, for the ramparts we lost were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare along bursting in air, came through the night as the flag was still there. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the
Well, we are in the museum and we're getting ready to go out to the fort, and oh my gosh, it's Goober the Traveling Bear, and he's here at Fort McHenry with none other than Kevin. All right, well, we are now walking up to Fort McHenry. We're taking our trusty path. We have a beautiful day and the fort looks awesome. Of course, I have a couple friends with me and Goober the Traveling Bear. So I hope you'll stick through this whole video. We had a beautiful time in the museum, and we are now heading to the fort. And we have our first roadside welcome. You are now on post. So this is one of the first things you'll see when you're walking on the path. And we'll continue up a little bit because we see a couple more. Beautiful day here in Baltimore. The Society of the War of 1812. All right, well, we've moved up a little closer to our fort, and just another little snippet as we get closer. Now I have a little bit of wind, so I'm not sure if I'll have to re-edit this or not. We'll see how it goes. The fort looks quite... Let's go take a look at these gun batteries. We'll pause here and get closer. Well, we've gotten closer. Very impressive. Very impressive indeed. We need to make a Fort McHenry game. Gun carriages are red. There we are. And pretty nifty indeed. All right, Kevin's going to read the narration for this artillery battery.
The defenders who manned the heavy cannons in front of you represented a unique combination of soldiers and sailors. One unit, the U.S. Sea Fencibles, included civilian sailors. Wearing the clothing of their trade, they were issued muskets, drilled as soldiers, and considered part of the U.S. Army.
Thank you, Kevin. And then...
But what's wrong with this?
So we have the guns that won the battle. Kevin, will you want to read this for me? It's hard to hold the camera and do reading, believe it or not.
The gun deck in front of you is a partial representation of the fort's 1814 water battery. Made up of 26 cannons in 2 tiers, the water battery comprised the fort's primary means of defense. The cannons that stood here fired shot weighing 18 and 36 pounds, almost a mile and a half. Heated cannonballs, known as hot shot, proved especially devastating to wooden ships. During most of the battle, the British kept their distance to avoid the return fire of the fort. As a result, most of their bombs and rockets missed the target. By dawn's early light on September 14th, the British withdrew, unwilling to come within range of the fort's guns.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we did a video of Hot Shot at Fort Niagara a couple weeks ago, and you can find that Hot Shot video on my channel. Well, I had bad audio here. We had an issue with the weather. We had some wind, so I'm overdubbing this. And right now the guard is coming out, the fort guard, and you just have to say how wonderful it is to see young people, all of them are probably under 16, coming out, doing this on a hot summer day. Now they are wearing white trousers with blue coats. You'll notice their headgear, their hats no longer have the tri-corner. They have been cut down so they can use their muskets. They're carrying Charleville musket styles from the styled after the French Charleville. They're wearing white leather belts and straps along with a haversack and wooden canteens. Their drummer is playing a cadence, and now they're going to do a musket firing demonstration for the tourist and set up around their artillery pieces. And again, just wonderful programs that Fort McHenry has. And a couple of these clips will have my audio where the wind was causing me an issue. Hopefully it won't be too much of a difference in the video quality.
We're so close, you always overlook it.
Exactly. It's the same.
Kevin's
Been in Maryland 60 years and I've never been here.
Never?
Never.
This is your first
all
time?
right. Well,
Holy shit.
we are walking along the fort walls, getting ready for the entrance. More than likely, the wind will be, I don't know, I think maybe the wind will be okay. We'll see in a little while. There's a lot to see here. Entering Fort McHenry, a deadly crossfire. More than likely, I'm going to be stripping this video of audio and redoing it. So here we have the main entrance, and there's our flag. Wow. Let's see here. We'll pause the camera. All right, we're going to explore in this zone, and then we'll go back to another area. There is so much to see here, it's almost overwhelming. You can save Fort McHenry yourself. Do not walk on the slopes. Do not climb on the cannons. Wow. Now these are Civil War era guns. Let's see what's over here. The great guns of the fort, the Rodman cannons. Okay. Now, that's pretty impressive there. So we have Rodman cannons, the guns in Fort, heaviest cannons ever mounted at Fort McHenry, the largest fired exploding projectiles weighing 440 pounds, mass produced. They were coming of age Americans' iron industry. Special process developed by John Thomas Rodman enabled them to cool from the inside out, giving them durability. Installed in 1866. All right, and that's the view. Let's go look at some more exciting. Oh wow, look at that. There's Kevin's in search of Goober the traveling. Kevin, can you fit your head in that cannon?
I could if it wasn't blocked off.
Oh, too bad.
Well, actually, no, I probably could.
It'd be like Winnie the Pooh. We'd have to.
An extremely large head, though.
All right, here's our view of the Rodman guns into the harbor, and quite impressive. Quite impressive indeed. All right, well, here we have some more Rodman guns, and oh my gosh, it's Goober the Traveling Bear, and he's sitting on a batch of giant cannonballs. Pretty impressive, Goober. All right, we're going in. You're following me into the Ravelin magazine. Now this is where they would store the ammunition for the outer works. And there we go. I'm very fortunate. We have very few tourists today. There's two entrances to the magazine. And that's how it looks. And we have gunpowder. All right, back out. Of course, we have heavy doors. So as the ammunition would be carried up and out to the artillery pieces, these doors would be open and closed. All right, let's head on out of the Ravelin Powder Magazine. All right, here we go. We're entering Fort McHenry. Now we have the small door and the big gate, just like all the other forts. And we will venture down. All right, well, we are doing another dub because Kevin Goober and I climbed down into the bomb-proof, the casemate. And the echoing in here was incredible, and I couldn't get very good audio. So the bomb-proof is where you could go to hide out from those pesky artillery and mortar shells that are coming from the British. So the walls are very thick. There are ventilation holes in the bomb-proof. Now, Kevin and I went into the bomb-proof. It was very cool, a little damp. Now, with Kevin's help, we tried to figure out the size of this room. And you're going to see there's the ventilation shafts, so you have fresh air coming in. And then the curved ceiling helped deflect the cannonballs that would be dropping in. And Kevin is working out the footage. I think he thought it was around 16 to 20 feet wide by around 24 to 30 feet long. Now, it was really an experience to climb in here. And you'll see that here we are looking at the ceiling again and that curved structure. And getting back out was an interesting process again. And that's about it for this part. Okay, and this is the last of my audio dubs. We actually were coming into the fort right now and looking at the parade ground when the fire alarms went off. They were testing the fire system. So right now we are just panning the fort. You'll see the magazine, the curved barn-looking structure, the officers' barracks, and so forth. And then off to the left is the jail. And here we are in the guard room and jail cell area. And we have still the same slanted beds seen at Fort Niagara and many others.
And they're built on an angle.
They're built on an angle, and when we listened to Sergeant Mike Malecki at Fort Niagara, he explained that the angle was supposed to be healthy for you and helped your blood get circulated from your head to your feet.
Well, it's true. That's why you have pillows under your head or shoulders.
Yeah. All right, so we will leave the guard room and continue out into the plaza. You want to start left to right, and we have Old Glory flying. Now, there's one of the War of 1812 veterans, one of the few that are still alive, and he may talk to us about his battle actions during the war when we get down to him.
exhibits in here.
Okay, here's another one of our nice exhibits.
Here's a hole to Mexico, it says.
Push the buttons on the radio to hear 3 programs from World War II. So this fort was manned during World War II. It was manned in World War I.
They were still using the Rodmans?
Yeah, they were still using the Rodman. This watercolor painted shortly after the battle. And we see some British ships sinking out there. All right, we will continue on.
I have to confess, I don't know what the losses were for the British. They had several ships damaged.
Open, please. Close the door during the winter. Now, really, when you think about it, this fort isn't all that big.
No, it's not.
It really isn't.
It's not.
So,
Fort Washington's bigger interior.
Yeah. Niagara is bigger.
all
You know
right.
what? It is. You're right.
Let's see what we have in here. The battle for Baltimore. It looks like we have a cannon. Fog of war. Press button to begin. There's a movie in here. So, Kevin, will you be kind enough to hit the button? The Battle of Baltimore map presentation is loading. One moment, please. I don't know how long this will be,
Do we press the button again?
but here we go.
On September 11, 1814, the British fleet sailed into the mouth of the Patapsco River. 2 weeks before, the British had captured Washington and burned the public buildings. Now they planned a worse fate for Baltimore, a city they called a nest of pirates.
Damn right.
But Baltimore was prepared. Fort McHenry had been strengthened, and several gun batteries supported Fort McHenry in guarding the harbor entrance. In the hot weeks of late summer, Major General Sam Smith had directed citizens, free blacks, soldiers, and slaves to build defenses at Hampstead Hill across the expected route of the British advance. People gave money and supplies, and militia poured into Baltimore. When the British ships appeared, General Smith sent a brigade of militia, commanded by General John Stricker, marching out the North Point Road. As General Smith anticipated, the British attacked by land and sea. On the morning of September 12th, the veteran British soldiers stepped ashore at North Point and began marching toward Baltimore. As a last defense measure, the Americans began sinking merchant ships to block the harbor. Halfway to Baltimore, the British advance guard encountered a party of American riflemen, and in a brief skirmish, their commander, Major General Robert Ross, was killed. Continuing their advance, the British struck the main body of the American forces. The Battle of North Point raged for 2 hours. Colonel Arthur Brooke directed British regulars to the American left, causing half the militia to withdraw in confusion. But the American right and center stood firm, and the remaining 1,500 Americans held against the advance of 4,000 British for over an hour. After suffering twice as many casualties as they inflicted, British experience and numbers finally forced the Americans to fall back toward the city. At dawn, on September 13th, the British began the second part of their two-pronged attack. British warships opened fire on Fort McHenry. All all day the Americans endured the bombardment, but the rain of bombs and rockets did not weaken the fort. When the British ships moved closer, Major George Armistead ordered the fort's cannon to open fire and drove them back. Meanwhile, on land, the British Army marched toward Baltimore. At Hempstead Hill, the British were stopped by the strong American earthworks and the 15,000 men behind them. Soon after midnight on September 14th, the British Navy made a desperate attempt to create a diversion that would assist the Army and break the stalemate. They hoped to land and attack the fort and the other harbor defenses, while British soldiers with fixed bayonets stormed Hampstead Hill. Under the cover of darkness, British Marines and sailors in longboats rowed with muffled oars up the ferry branch past Fort McHenry. Their attempt failed. In the stormy weather, many of the longboats became lost and returned to the ships. Cannon fire from shore batteries caught the others in the water. On land, the British commander canceled the bayonet attack and ordered a withdrawal. The Battle of Baltimore was over. Standing on the deck of a truce ship returning to Baltimore, Francis Scott Key saw his country's flag flying over Fort McHenry. Baltimore had been saved.
Help! Help! Bill's in the jail.
So this is how big the jail cell was here at Fort McHenry. And here's another shot. And somewhere around here there's one lone veteran of the War of 1812 who might tell.
I didn't realize there was
Kevin, what's in this room?
Well, it looks like we've stumbled upon the barracks, the sleeping quarters. You see these group of bunk beds with little things on the end to place their weapons, I'm sure. Fireplace, probably a water barrel.
All right. So this is the enlisted men's quarters.
Yeah.
The barracks for the home soldier. Now, Kevin, I see the staircase here, and in this room, it's not blocked off. So,
It's not.
What do you think? Is it closed or is it open?
It's not closed.
Okay. I'm going to pause the camera. We're going to go up this staircase. Hold on, everybody. Kevin, what was up there?
Just wanted you to have the experience of going up and down the stairs.
We got the experience of going up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
All right, we're leaving the barracks room, and we're going to visit some more of this wonderful historic site. And the veteran of the War of 1812 that's sitting there on the park bench seems a little grumpy today, so we will talk to him a little bit later. There's his feet. I don't want to put him in the video. All right, let's venture into this building, and of course, like all my videos, they're not overly edited, and they are meant to be what they are, to give you that feel of being here as a tourist yourself.
Oh, sorry.
All right, let's walk into this room.
The actual rate was about a foot below because it was built up over the years from different wars.
Okay, this is the archaeology room of what they found here when they reworked on the fort. Beef and pork bones, so they know what the soldiers ate. We also have broken bottles. I'm not going to spend a ton of time in here and have someone get bored, but we are hitting a few of the main, some shrapnel, bayonet, and how it looks.
There's a privately owned tavern just outside the gate.
Now this is interesting. The flagstaff goes all the way down, and that's how it stays in the ground without tilting. Quite impressive. Yes.
Oh, it's this far over here. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the anchor.
And that's the original cross base, which is just huge. Those beams are more than a foot across.
Oh, it has to be a whole flag that big.
And this whole section would be buried in the ground. All right, we're going in. So, we're in the junior officers' quarters, a room of many uses, and we'll try to not have too much glare. Boy, they have the table set. They have some. What do you think that would be for? What are they drinking, wine or port in this time period?
I think wine would be too expensive. I think they would just drink a porter beer.
Porter beer, okay.
Or beer. But there's your oysters.
They would not be drinking water.
No, not this close to the Brackish Bay.
No.
And trying to get by this glare I have, but
yeah,
I can't do much about that. I'm sorry, everyone, about the glares.
We are too. We're very sorry.
Well, I have my helpers with me.
Speaking of sorry, Bill.
And Goober the traveling bear, of course. All right, so we're going into the powder magazine. Prepare. Now here's a pan from across from the magazine, just to give you a feel there. And so, not all the gunpowder stored in the magazine was for artillery use. Some of it was to make for musket cartridges. All right, this is the powder magazine. We're going in.
Oh, you know what?
You know, you hit a curved surface, it might bounce off. Hit a flat roof and explode.
Over 30,000 pounds of explosive.
Wow. Walter, Kevin, would you mind reading that while I pan the gunpowder room?
Gunpowder for a fort is kept in the magazine.
Thank you, Walter. All right.
You can cut that out. I'll reread it.
That's okay.
Read it properly, Paul.
I will.
We're good. We love humor in our
things in the Derek mood.
In our world anyhow.
Read it like Donald Duck then. If you can, I can't do Donald Duck.
All right, cool.
All right, so someone's now reading my plaque.
Gunpowder for a fort is kept in the magazine. The term magazine comes from the French and Arabic words meaning storehouse. Perhaps the most important building at Fort McHenry, over 30,000 pounds of explosive powder could be stored in this small room, the rough equivalent of over 10 tons of TNT. The Etna and the Bologna powder mills just outside of Baltimore manufactured the powder used at Fort McHenry. The powder was stored in barrels weighing 100 pounds each.
Thank you very much. Incredible. Now this powder magazine is really nifty. You have to come to Fort McHenry and visit the powder.
I think you're like something special to say.
Well, we are in the artillery park at Fort McHenry, and they have a wide variety of guns here, tubes. And if I had Park Ranger Robert Ambrose and Park Ranger Bob Studi from Fort Frederick, they are in charge of artillery training classes. They could tell me everything about these guns. And this one here is especially nice. I think that could be a Napoleonic era, and it's French, I do believe. And anyhow, it's just one of the many wonders to see at Fort McHenry. Well, we are about to enter one of the other buildings here at Fort McHenry, and let's see here. One-way traffic on the trails. Press button to view. Defending the fort. Major George Armistead's desk. So this is the officers' quarters. very neat. And there's a couple of tourists in here. I'll not get them on video.
I think we're being installed.
So in the flag room, they have a really neat video, audio presentation and how the flag was made.
Although Betsy Ross and Mary Pickersgill were both flag makers, they lived in different cities. Betsy Ross lived in Philadelphia and is associated with making the very first American flag in 1777. Mary Pickersgill lived in Baltimore and made the flag that inspired Francis Scott Key to write the national anthem. Armistead decided to keep the flag on his own after the battle, probably as a treasured heirloom. When Armistead died in 1818, ownership passed to his wife, Louisa. From time to time, Armistead's widow allowed the flag to be displayed to the public. When Armistead's wife died in 1861, the flag went not to her son, Christopher, but to her daughter, Georgiana. Being Southern sympathizers, Georgiana and her husband, William Appleton, kept the flag in their home in Baltimore during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War. With Georgiana's passing, she left the flag to her son, Evan Appleton. Appleton realized that the flag should be saved for all Americans and saw it as an object to preserve. Appleton promptly locked the flag in a safety deposit vault in downtown Manhattan. Evan Appleton's reluctance to have the flag displayed came from his concern that the flag was too fragile. Appleton's refusal to allow the flag to be carried in Baltimore's parade, marking the 75th anniversary of the battle, ignited a firestorm of protest. Baltimoreans chastised Appleton in newspaper accounts, stating that he did not legitimately own the flag. Evan Appleton's concern for preserving the original flag led him away from Baltimore and to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. In 1912, he gave the flag to the Smithsonian as a gift. He specifically set conditions that the flag could never leave the Smithsonian and always had to remain on view to the public. In 1913, the flag, now 100 years old, was beginning to show the effects of time. The Smithsonian hired Amelia Fowler, a known flag conservator, to preserve the flag. 8 weeks and almost 1,700,000 stitches later, a new hand-sewn linen backing was now part of the flag. The newly backed flag was displayed in a special case for the 100th anniversary of the Star-Spangled Banner in 1914. Since that time, it has been viewed by millions as the centerpiece display at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. In 1998, the flag was showing signs of wear, and Fowler's stitches were removed as part of a decade-long conservation effort. On November 21st, 2008, the newly conserved flag opened for display in a dramatic new gallery. Historic preservation is vitally important to saving America's treasures. The efforts of the Armistead family and the Smithsonian to save the flag allow visitors to link America's past with the present and understand its significance as a national symbol.
Okay, well, we're continuing our walk through here. I hope you're enjoying this video. And once again, we have more barracks. I presume this is the officers' barracks. We have a fireplace, and yes, as Kevin has noticed in...
This is the guardhouse. This would be an officer.
Is this a guardhouse? I'm sorry. This is a guardhouse, keeping watch over the fort. Thank you, Kevin, for keeping my videos accurate.
Gotta keep you honest.
Hold on, Kevin. I think I hear a noise. Kevin, do you hear that noise? Where's it coming from? Oh my gosh, it's Goober the Traveling Bear visiting Fort. All right, well, we've been in all of them. We've been in all of them. We've been down to the casemate. Volunteers are working diligently. Thank you for all you do, sir.
You're welcome.
Trying to promote history in many ways. Video, and here we have the guard coming back.
See you later. Yeah, bye.
Well, stay off that. Work the dance.
told you something to do.
So all the walls here were white at one time?
Yeah, it's all whitewash.
Why did they paint the fort white?
To give the soldiers something to do.
To give the soldiers something to do. How hard was it to get the whitewash removed?
No, it came off by itself.
Here's some more views of the forts as we start to exit. And our flag. So out here is the cemetery where wounded and those that did not survive their wounds from the Battle of Gettysburg were buried. And there are some tombstones out there. And we'll tie this in with our tour talk.
Told you something to do.
So all the walls here were white at one time?
Yeah, it's all whitewash.
Why did they paint the fort white?
To give the soldiers something to do.
To give the soldiers something to do. How hard was it to get the whitewash removed?
No, it came off by itself.
All right, well, we are at Fort McHenry with the historian, Mr. Sheets. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
And from the Gettysburg family area. And take it away, sir. What do you have to tell me of the history of Fort McHenry?
Fort McHenry was a national monument and historic shrine, was formed in 1933 by an act of Congress, transferring Fort McHenry from Gettysburg. This was part of Gettysburg at one time. And then in 1933, when Roosevelt reorganized the federal government, Fort McHenry broke apart from Gettysburg and formed its own site. So we're known as a national monument because of the battle. We're a historic shrine, the only one in the country, because of the connection to Francis Scott Key and the Star-Spangled Banner. So this year we expect about 700,000 people a year here. So about 3 miles from downtown Baltimore. We're 43 acres. And so our primary theme here is the War of 1812, the Star-Spangled Banner. But it also figures quite prominently during the American Civil War, especially during the Antietam and Gettysburg campaigns. Most of all your Confederate soldiers, prisoners of war, were brought here as far away as Vicksburg by way of Chicago, were all brought in here. From Gettysburg, about 20,000 Confederates were brought down here by railroad, then marched from downtown Baltimore 3 miles to here to a big stockade prison, and then from here they were sent to Point Lookout in southern Maryland. So this is a transfer point for prisoners of war during the Civil War campaigns. And of course Baltimore is the headquarters of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, without whom Lincoln probably could not have won the American Civil War. So Baltimore is very important during the Civil War years because it's a border state. And all the railroad lines, telegraph lines from the north and the west all came through here first and then south to Washington, D.C. So Lincoln had to hold on to Baltimore at all costs to ensure the security of the federal capital. So in May of 1861, Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. A legal act of the president. Only Congress has that authority to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, and this allowed the commanding officer here to arrest anyone in Baltimore, anyone in Maryland who had received correspondence from anybody in the South. If you were suspected, that's all they needed to arrest you and imprison you here at the fort. So during the course of the Civil War, not only were the Confederate prisoners being held here, but a lot of civilians being held here, upwards of 2,000. 84 of them were women. And that's the interesting part of the story regarding prisoners of war here during the Civil War. The commanding officer wrote in 1863, "These women of Baltimore are the most dangerous and desperate women I've ever encountered in my entire military career. These Baltimore women are not to be trusted. They are spies, bushwhackers, and women of the blackest dye."
Wow.
So the women's story is even more thrilling than the Civil War story soldiers here.
Table.
We are in the reference library here, and oh my gosh, it's Goober the Traveling Bear, and he is doing research on the next site we go to, which I think is, I've lost track, the Carlisle War College for 2 days. I have to look at our calendar.
Isn't someone going to wait?
We're going to get back to Mr. Sheets here. All right, well, we're going to talk about Gettysburg and its connection to Fort McHenry.
Fort McHenry is only 50 miles south of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and that battle campaign played a very important part in the history of Fort McHenry during the American Civil War. They could actually hear the Battle of Gettysburg on July 3rd as Lee is unleashing his artillery against the Union lines. And right after that battle, well, actually during the entire Gettysburg campaign, upwards of 20,000 Confederate soldiers would be arrested and taken prisoner and shipped here to Fort McHenry by railroad, and then marched 3 miles from downtown Baltimore right to this site. And they were kept here in a provost prison, a wooden stockade. They had taken some old horse stables, 2-story horse stables from the 1840s, and converted them to prisons for these prisoners of war. The soldiers were literally taken out of the back door while the prisoners were brought in to the front door, and this is in the summer months. So during the course of the war, about 20,000 Confederates from the Battle of Gettysburg alone were detained here, could be transferred to larger facilities. But the first influx of prisoners arrived here from the Battle of Antietam in 1862, and that's when Fort McHenry really started revving up its military preparedness. It's a dead issue.
Well, we're going to talk about a dead issue, the cemetery here at Fort McHenry.
For the 700,000 people that come here annually to visit Fort McHenry, they're coming here to learn the story of the War of 1812, Star-Spangled Banner, Francis Scott Key, and the American flag. But one of the items on the grounds that people don't see, because it no longer exists, was the Fort McHenry Cemetery. There was a cemetery here from 1797 up until 1895. A few of the 1812 defenders were buried here, but with the advent of the American Civil War, by the end of the Civil War, there were about 400 burials here, and located just north of the fort walls. And the cemetery survived here up until 1895, and they had to take everybody out of the cemetery because the Patapsco River was washing away the edges of the cemetery. So in 1895, all 400 graves, I don't think they got everybody, were transferred to larger cemeteries here in Baltimore or private cemeteries. So many of the people who were buried here were the garrison soldiers, their wives, their children, but there were quite a number of Confederates who were buried here, and civilians. And but nothing survives of the cemetery today. People walk right over top of the cemetery not knowing what's underneath their feet.
So there could still be somebody buried out there.
Could be.
Well, thank you very much. That is something I never knew about, and it's interesting to learn new things about historic sites that you thought you already knew quite a bit. All right, now we're going to go over some information about John Wilkes Booth and his connection to Fort McHenry. Take it away.
Everyone who's familiar with the American Civil War, at least here in Baltimore, makes the connection to John Wilkes Booth, who's buried right here in Baltimore at Greenmount Cemetery in an unmarked grave. What a lot of people don't realize is one of the conspirators wrapped up in the Lincoln assassination was Samuel Arnold, and he was a clerk at the time at Fort Monroe, Virginia. And Provost Marshal from Fort McHenry went down and arrested him at the fort and brought him directly here to Fort McHenry and put him in one of the prison cells in the fort that still survived today. Although we have found no official records of him being placed in the cell, I believe he was put in as an alias in the prison records here. But in 1904, he wrote his little autobiography of what had happened during the Lincoln years and his imprisonment here at Fort McHenry. He was only detained here overnight until they could be transferred to Washington for the Lincoln conspirator trials, where he was later set free. Not enough evidence against him, and he ended up dying here in Baltimore.
Wow. Well, thank you. All right, we have another Fort McHenry story. Take it away.
One of the stories of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812, and especially the Battle of Baltimore here in 1814, were the number of casualties that were being brought to Fort McHenry from the battlefield 5 miles away from here. And of course, those were killed and wounded here at Fort McHenry. The hospital was a 2-story brick structure located just a few yards from where we are. And during the War of 1812, Pennsylvania units came down from Pennsylvania to help defend Baltimore during the British attack in September of 1814. One of those units, there was a young 18-year-old boy. His name is Simon Cameron, and he ended up staying here while the regiment went back to Pennsylvania, and he got a job as an aide to the surgeon here at the hospital. And that Simon fella would become the Secretary of War under President Lincoln during the American Civil War. So there's a little connection here with Simon Cameron during the American Civil War and the War of 1812 here. So all these stories have connections.
And I have to ask, what is your background? How do you know so much about Fort McHenry and history here and all the different aspects of this fort?
My family is from Culpeper, Virginia, the right side of the war. And my family started in Gettysburg in 1780. They were wagon makers. And the family legend is that in the 1830s, there was an argument, I understand, what to name the town, Gettysburg or Sheedstown. And the Gettys family won out, and my family evidently got mad and left and went down to Culpeper, Virginia, where they are still there today, farmers. And so my family came from Gettysburg but settled in Culpeper, Virginia. And then during the Battle of Gettysburg, my family came up as the Little Fork Rangers, 4th Virginia Cavalry. And as soon as we got to Gettysburg, we lost the war.
All right, well, we have a Civil War book that I'm going to purchase for my book review, and take it away. What is this book about?
It's about Baltimore during the Civil War. A good friend of mine, Dan Toomey, who's probably one of the foremost historians of Maryland's role during the American Civil War, and I co-authored this. It took us about 2 months to write the book. It came out in 1997 under Dan's publishing company, Toomey Press. And it's Baltimore's role during the American Civil War, which includes a large chapter on Fort McHenry, prisoners of war. You know, there were over 200 Civil War sites here in Baltimore City alone, the largest being Camp Cadwalader, just outside the gates of the fort. So we investigate all the hospitals and name all the sites of Baltimore's role during the American Civil War, all in one little book here.
Well, I'm going to plan on ordering that when I get home, and I'll put that in my book review for my video channel for the next month or two. I have to read it first.
Okay.
Thank you very much for everything you've done for my YouTube channel today.
Now, everybody we mentioned.
All right. Well, I guess this is it for my video of Fort McHenry. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please stay safe, be kind, be courteous, visit a historic site near you, and most importantly, please consider subscribing to the new channel, Bill's History World and Goober the Bear. Thank you very much.